as our Director of Compliance. We've got Joseph McClellan from a little agency called FERC. You might have heard of that one. We've got Mr. Ernesto Ballesteros from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. We've got Miles Beckner from the FBI, and we have Miss Michelle England from the National Security Agency. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Kenneth.
Well, thank y'all. Good morning. Happy to see y'all. Happy to be your natural caffeine for the next session. We have a really good panel today focused on threat assessment. We got some really great panelists here, and I'm going to do something just a little bit different. Y'all need to get to know this team up here, bottom line, because we're all doing really good things for reliability and security and here to help and keep the critical infrastructure in the country safe. So I'm going to let them give their own introductions, and I'll do mine last because y'all, those that know me, if there's a mic in front of me, I will use it, and use it to the best of my ability. But well, I'll let them, whether it's short or simple or long, give their own introductions. I'll go ahead and start here. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, thanks, Kenneth. I'm Joe McClelland. I'm the Director of the Office of Energy Infrastructure Security at FERC. I've been at FERC for 20 years. Prior to my time in this office, I was also the founding director, the first director of the Office of Electric Reliability. And prior to that time, I was 20 years in the electric utility industry. I worked for Allegheny Energy, and then I worked out for Custer Public Power District before joining FERC. So thank you for the invitation to be here today.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Kenneth, thank you for having me out here. Folks, my name is Ernesto Ballesteros. I serve as your appointed cybersecurity state coordinator for Texas at CISA. I've been there for about 3.5 years now. And prior to that, worked for the Texas Department of Information Resources, confusingly, as the cybersecurity state coordinator and the chair for the Texas Cybersecurity Council. Been blessed in my career, to be honest with you. I've been a professor for many years. I teach adjunct law right now at St. Mary's Law. And fantastic opportunity to get out here and talk to you folks about cybersecurity today and what we can do for you at CISA. Thanks.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Miles Beckner. I'm a supervisor with the FBI here local in Austin. And what that means is I have the privilege of running a squad of agents that investigate counterintelligence crimes. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Michelle England. I'm the Chief of Critical Networks Defense for NSA here in Texas. My team is actually, we encompass a lot of things. We do weapons and space assessments. In this particular case, we also sit up there and support any critical infrastructure needs that come in to, that include, the IoT, ICS, and SCADA, as well as cloud security. And my team also does the threat hunting that you guys sometimes hear about, and we respond to those national security systems, and we help monitor and do all of those things. So thank you for having me today.
Well, thank y'all, and I'll briefly introduce myself. I'll do it a little differently, something you don't know about me. I used to work at Subway when I was in high school. I am a certified sandwich artiste, and I have the certificate to prove it. And also, for those that don't know, I'm an ordained minister, and I had married a couple of friends and family out there. And also, the beginning of high school football starts Friday, and I will be up there as well. So let's get it started. We got a lot of good questions here. And we got a lot to tell y'all today, so hopefully y'all bear with us. So we're going to start off with the first question in regards to how can critical infrastructure sectors effectively collaborate to enhance both cyber and physical security measures? And we're going to have Joe from FERC lead off on the discussion there.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. I think of that question, I think of sort of two pieces to the question: infra sector within the sector, and then intersector across the sectors. Both are critically important, as I'm sure you folks are aware. So to begin the question, I'd like to start with a story. It's an unclassified story. But when we first set up the Office of Electric Reliability, we thought it was important. Our chairman at that time was Pat Wood, who's in Houston, and we love Pat Wood. Pat set the office up. He thought it was critically important that everyone receive the top-level security clearances. So we all had TS and better security clearances in that office. And we had access to information that at that time the industry didn't have access to. So we set up a process that was open and it was deliberative to produce electric reliability standards and cybersecurity standards at that time. But that process was also open to adversaries. And so it takes, on average, this is not criticism because the NERC standards are essential. I feel they're essential and they establish great foundational practices. But to put a standard in place from its inception to its implementation was about 4 or 5 years. Adversaries could read that standard. They could understand, adapt, and easily step around the standard because they're not supposed to be. They're not typically best practices. But they could step around the standard before it was implemented. And they were doing so. And we're watching adversaries stepping around these standards. And we knew about it in the federal government. And the adversaries knew about it that were exploiting the systems. But the only entities that didn't know about it, short of FBI showing up and telling them they've been compromised, were the utilities. So we got to put a better system in place. And this really goes back to something Chuck was talking about. We wanted to set up an office that was open and collaborative. So it was confidential and collaborative with the utility industry members. And our folks are top subject matter experts. Many of them come from the industry I did. I'm an electrical engineer by training. I've done many different functions within the electric utility business, including SCADAs, relay, and control systems. So we have folks who are very specialized. They understand and cooperate within the intelligence community. They look at these threats. They look at these actions and activities that the adversaries are taking, and they're helping develop best practices and implementation plans to counter them. That's what our office does. So our office is set up to work on a voluntary basis with the industry members, but we need to have that trust relationship. We're not out there to enforce NERC standards. We're not out there to promulgate NERC standards. We do assist our offices with subject matter expertise, but we never attribute anything that we learn. We never reveal those details that we're working with utilities on. And so we're set up to engage in those practices. So within the sector, we have to work with multiple other agencies, and it gets very complicated. I have in my notes a very long paragraph about all the other agencies just within the energy sector. DHS has overarching authority. DOE is a sector risk management agency. FERC is the regulator for particular types of infrastructure. TSA has authority over cybersecurity of oil and natural gas pipelines. Coast Guard has authority for offshore LNG terminals. Department of Interior has physical security authority over pipelines. And I could go on and on and on. And the relationships that we have to maintain and establish are complex. They're respectful. We watch the jurisdictional boundaries, but we're all well aware adversaries exploit those boundaries. But I said all that just to say, if we don't have industry participation, it's all for naught. We have to have your help. We have to engage with you. And just a couple quick examples. I know that Joseph talked about changing dynamic on the power grid. We're seeing baseload resources like coal and nuclear retiring in record numbers. So we're losing baseload capacity while we're introducing, wind and solar, which does not have that baseload capacity. Adversaries know that. They're watching it, and they're exploiting it. They can't exploit it. So they're watching our networks. They're watching these retirements, and they can take advantage of these retirements. At the same time, we're seeing an introduction of new technologies. AI, for example. I don't know. Did anyone see the article on AI? Where there was a development for a replacement of the lithium-ion batteries. Did anyone see that article? Okay, Google it, because that article says that there were 32 million potential combinations to replace lithium-ion batteries. Microsoft and Pacific Northwest National Labs used AI to research those 32 million combinations, and within 80 hours, they narrowed it to 25 candidates. And within that short period of time after that, they selected a final candidate to work out a replacement for lithium-ion, uses 70% less lithium. And so when you think about applying that technology now to vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities, or analyzing code to look for zero-day exploits, think about how that technology now can be turned, especially with the introduction of quantum computing You can rent quantum computing now. It's not as reliable and it's not as fast as it's going to be, but it's going to get there very quickly. Some estimates are it'll go up to 10 to the 23rd to 10 to the 28th faster than known fastest computing quantities today. Put that in perspective. I've been told, or I've at least read, that the Earth could be 4.5 billion years old. All right, if we go 10 to the 23rd faster on that, that means the Earth would have been created using that standard in 15 100 millionths of a second. So now when you combine quantum computing and AI, and they're converging, when you combine these new technologies, you can see what the federal government's up against, let alone you folks. And so that really requires us to work together. And then lastly, and I'll stop and leave it for the rest of the panelists, I have plenty more I could say, but we have programs in place. So when you think about major, say, cyber and physical security attacks, Russia, to Manny's point, they're using Ukraine as a test bed, right? Not just for cyber, but for physical attacks yesterday. Did anyone see the articles from yesterday when the power plants were attacked? These are surgical attacks. They appear to me to be surgical attacks because they're not hitting facilities that are causing a year-long outage. They're hitting facilities that are recovering, able to recover, and then provide at least partial restoration to the Ukrainian power grid. How many people in here are tied into what they're doing? Are you watching what they're doing, what they're attacking? Are you looking at the sparing program? How about the assistance and the response from the Ukrainian authorities or utilities? If you're not watching that, if you're not tied in, you should be. Because these are all adversarial tactics. Drones are relatively inexpensive. They're being produced in number. They're being used on the battlefield. I think I heard Clint talk about that. They're being used on the battlefield in this conflict, and it's frightening. So what are the drone mitigations? What can we do? We've been talking with FAA. We've been working with DHS. We've been working with the Department of Defense. And we're actually going to try to put out some research and development to develop new technologies, new ways to address the drones. I won't go into it here, but we hope to have utility participation in those initiatives as well. So it's sort of an unprecedented time for me to see these programs, this collaboration. But I will say we do on-the-ground physical security assessments. We do those in collaboration with CISA. So we will do on-the-ground physical security assessments as well as deep dive cybersecurity assessments where we start on the outside of the IT system and we go the entire way through the OT system. It's not used for compliance with NERC standards or for enforcement with NERC standards. To Chuck's point, we are regulators. If we find something potentially a NERC standards violation, which has never happened, and we've done many, many, many dozens of these assessments. But if we ever would, the plan is just to say, hey, there could be a potential infraction here with the standards. Investigate and self-report if you need to. That would be the extent of it. But because we're not looking for that. We're looking for what we know on the classified side are campaigns and vulnerabilities, the campaigns that the adversaries are conducting and vulnerabilities that they're exploiting. And then we're going to identify those for you, and we're going to suggest mitigations, and we'll even assist with your mitigations if you need it. Because that's where we are. It's going to take all of us working together. We have these programs, we have these opportunities. We work with the state commissions, we bring them in wherever we can because pieces of the jurisdiction we don't have, they do. And so we have resource materials we developed. We depend on you to help make those better. We depend on the state commissions to help make those resource materials better. So I'll stop there. I mean, I could talk more about insider threat. I could talk more about malware, supply chain vulnerabilities. We cover it all. But I'll stop there, leave the other panelists comment, and be happy to discuss further as we need to.
Thank you, Brother Joe. Preach.
Thank you.
The threats.
I do teach Sunday school.
I mean,
too, yeah.
and then I'll let Ernesto speak. The threats are real. So this is real life. I mean, you can read it on the news. It's not just, it was different many years ago. The evidence is there. It's true. It's happening. The threats are real. Individually, you're doing that for your own organizations. I think we got to start thinking holistically, right? Sharing information, but protecting information at the same time, right? Which is, there's many different venues to do that. And it's more and more important, given what's going on in the world today, that we come together for critical infrastructure. And I mean all sectors of critical infrastructure, even though I live in the energy world. Hopefully you get that today, is that we're in it together, and we got to work together, and we got to start breaking down these barriers, these communication barriers, just for the greater good of things. From my perspective, sorry if I can't turn this way. My neck only goes so far that way. But Ernesto, do you have anything you want to add about
I do
collaboration
actually.
there?
Again, folks, thanks for coming today and listening to what we have to say. I want to touch on this question here, and and I think you guys already kind of brought up a couple of key points. Collaboration amongst your peers, right? So at the local level, at the state level, the value proposition of information sharing and collaboration cannot be overstated. We have some ISACs and some ISALs in the room today. I applaud the efforts that you guys have made in order to break down those barriers and to bring folks into these information sharing ecosystems. Anybody here from DIR today? Okay, I'm gonna brag about my former employer. So in Texas, you also have the Texas Information Sharing and Analysis organizations. ISALs and ISACs, very similar, same intent. But the idea behind these information sharing ecosystems is that you can leverage the collective knowledge and expertise, but also for situational awareness purposes and creating a common operating picture, working with your peers, working with other utilities, working with other folks that are just in various critical infrastructure sectors that may be seeing threats or vulnerabilities or tactics, techniques, and procedures, or maybe even just sharing best practices. And it's totally understandable. I know that there's some apprehension in joining these types of information sharing ecosystems. Of course, you want to make sure that you can trust the folks that you're spilling your guts to effectively, right? But there are some legal mechanisms that have been put out there. You have the Cybersecurity and Information Sharing Act of 2015. That helps alleviate a lot of the concerns there with whether or not information can be disclosed or misused if it's cybersecurity related. I would strongly encourage organizations in the room here and those of you that are watching remotely to think long and hard about not just joining one ISAC. It doesn't have to necessarily be a sector specific ISAC, but also joining other ISALs. So the Texas Information Sharing and Analysis Organization at DIR, fantastic opportunity for you to contribute to that collective information sharing ecosystem in Texas. Now, in order to get to the point where we can actually not just consume information, but to analyze and provide meaningful feedback into those information sharing ecosystems, one other thing that we should do, I'm a strong believer in public-private partnerships, working with the universities. We're blessed in Texas to have so many fantastic research institutes, so many NSA, DHS, CAEs across the state. And indeed, DIR is seized on this to leverage their expertise and also work with private sector partners that may be able to contribute capabilities that you otherwise wouldn't be able to duplicate, right, at a single utility or a county or even at a state agency. Bringing all those folks to bear to share the collective expertise and capabilities to just make everybody aware. The value proposition of joining an ISAL is kind of having that bellwether of things to come and hopefully to get ahead. And then God forbid, if you are a victim of some sort of an attack, maybe sharing your best practices so that others don't suffer the same fate. And that's what I'll leave it at that.
Oh, good. Miles or Michelle, do y'all have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just follow up, in regards to what Joe and Ernesto did a good job explaining is bringing folks together. In the House, how many InfraGard members do we have? That's what I like to see. All right, now we're talking. So, it was about a quarter or so. For those that may not be aware, I'll give you just a little bit of information for your consideration. Love to have you guys on board. It's exactly kind of what Joe was talking about, bringing folks together and what Ernesto had said, sharing information. So InfraGard is a unique partnership between the FBI and individuals in the private sector for the protection of U.S. critical infrastructure and, of course, the American people. As one of the nation's largest public and private partnerships with over 80,000 members, InfraGard connects critical infrastructure owners, operators, and stakeholders with the FBI to provide education, networking, and information sharing on security threats and risks. Something that you may be interested in, I'll be over there after this.
I'll just add that, as everybody has alluded to, partnerships are so important to everything that we do. And Rob Joyce, our former CSD director, found that very important along with General Nakasone. So as you may not know, we do have a cybersecurity collaboration center within NSA. And that is our public-facing forum. And they do have private partnerships with everybody. And we also sit there and try and make sure that we also put out those cybersecurity security advisories for anything that we put out. And we try and put it at the lowest level as possible. There are going to be times when if you really need it, we can figure out how to get you something additional. But I would sit there and also, look at, CISA is always good about putting out their alerts, because those are important, and being able to understand what those are. And we are always here to sit there and try and help you figure out how to resolve any issues that you have.
Well, thank y'all. My fellow Americans, guardians of the grid. The collaboration is by the way, we're speaking about more and more collaboration, but it's happening, right? The federal side, the state side, regulatory, we're all talking now, right? Because we have a common mission on reliability and security as well. So you just gotta, how do you start? You just need to get involved, right? I think that's the bottom line. If you need to understand where to get involved, we talked about several examples. InfraGard, since that one's fresh, that's a really good, as a member of that. And even the meetings, we have some representatives here. Just going to the InfraGard meetings are so beneficial because you're meeting other organizations in critical infrastructure, just not your own, and sharing and talking and gaining contacts, and all for the greater good of reliability and security. So that was a wonderful first question. How about that, folks? So we're going to move on to the second question here, and this one's for Michelle leading off here, but kind of considering the evolving nature of the threats that are happening in this world, how should critical infrastructure, whether it's organization, entities, adapt their cybersecurity strategies to basically stay protected?
As we all know, the nature of our adversary changes on a daily basis, and they like to go after those low-hanging fruits. I'm not as eloquent as Mr. McFarland is over there, but one of the things that we have to do is we have to be cognizant of what our cyber health is, and making sure that we're addressing those simple things like updates. Now, let's not take the CrowdStrike thing because it worked out in Southwest's purview to not have good cyber health, and overall, we really know that cyber health is really the easiest thing for us to do, and that's just patching, right? Making sure that, we're also educating our people. And one thing I know as a cyber person, when I have to take my annual training, it's like, oh my God, I got to do this again. But it's an emphasis as to sit there and say, please don't just think that you know it. This is a reminder that even the things that you think you know, you can change, right? We have to be aware that, they're not looking at the complex things, they're looking at the simple things. How do you sit there and get after and make sure that you're addressing those simple things? Is that it?
Yeah, thank you. Ernesto, you want to follow
Yeah, I think my colleague over here from NSA, laid it out pretty well. At the outset, listen, folks, hopefully you're taking care of the basics, right? Maybe you've done some sort of a business impact analysis. You've gotten a good idea of what actually makes your organization tick. What's the mission? What are the services that help me accomplish that mission? Maybe working backwards and figuring out, what are all the systems that are absolutely essential for delivering those services such that we accomplish our mission? Understanding what those crown jewels are, putting those controls around those assets, and doing good old-fashioned IT and cybersecurity, just applying it to those assets that are essential for service delivery and mission enablement. Now that said, it stands to reason that if we're going and doing all of those basic fundamental practices that I'm sure everybody here in the room and our home viewing audience is engaging in, we should also stay abreast of not only the current trends, but what's emerging, what's coming across the horizon there. And I'm going to go back to information sharing. And information sharing is a fantastic vehicle for staying abreast of these current and emerging threats, this evolving threat landscape. And make no mistake about it, folks, it is evolving at a very, very fast pace. Underlying technology doesn't change all that much, but the tactics, techniques, and procedures, lots of unforeseeable or unintended consequences on the horizon. So cover the basics. Please start collaborating, engage these information sharing ecosystems, but also provide meaningful contributions. Be an active participant in those information sharing ecosystems. Now, as far as situational awareness that maybe you don't have to necessarily contribute to, we provide a lot of that. In fact, we have a very excellent panel here. I gotta give Kenneth some credit here. But at the federal side here, you've got all the different lines of effort. I mean, you've got intelligence, you've got threat response, you've got asset response, and those alerts and advisories that we just mentioned earlier on our website, indeed, also show up on our colleagues' websites here. We work together on that, and a lot of times we often reach out to you folks because, listen, our mission at CISA is to understand and manage critical infrastructure. Again, I like to add to the enacting legislation that we neither own, operate, or control. You guys are absolutely essential. So that information you share with us, it helps us to provide meaningful and actionable and timely information that helps protect the homeland.
Good. Yeah, I think the strategy, kind of getting to the heart of the discussion here and which is very important. Don't forget about the basics, right? Patch, patchy, patch, right? That we know the moment you don't patch, that could have been a higher or critical patch, or even something that was medium could have been something that would have patched a 0-day vulnerability or something of that effect. But I think the way that we're looking at cybersecurity now, especially when we're in the utility space or the energy sector, right? We're talking about industrial control systems here, right? We're talking about relays, communication processors, all sorts of SCADAs and wind management systems, and I can go on and on. It's a little different, right? You're opening and closing breakers. You're ramping up, ramping down generation, right? But the threats continue to evolve there as well. So we at a certain point, we got to catch up, if you will, whether it's regulation or whether it's the technology, where a lot of these appliances and hardware, well, they're being modernized as well, and with that, they're becoming more and more connected, right? That we talked about. So the strategy has to change from that defense in depth, which is always a great practice, to, dare I say it, zero trust architecture. Ooh, right? That's the new word, but it's true. You can't really trust anything these days. You have to have that mindset. You can't assume with trust but verify. You've heard those words, or they work for us, they're good. And we'll talk about insider threats and all that good stuff later. But the world is changing. And the actors, the bad actors out there, they're more sophisticated. They got more time to do reconnaissance. They got more time to social engineer you, phish you, all the good things, tactics that are out there. So they have that time to do that, and we have to kind of switch that strategy based off of risk, based off of budget, based off of what we have, right? And do our best to protect what that's ours. Joe, did you want to put
just real
swing?
quick?
Yeah.
I wanted to sort of put something that Michelle, Ernesto, and Manny said, is that when you go to the fundamentals, the fundamentals are pretty easy to see. They're also maybe not that difficult to do. But that does not mean that they're not critically important, because they are. And it's the old adage, it's no different here. 20% will get you 80%. Did you ever hear that? Mm-hmm. It's really kind of like 10% gets you 90% in this realm. But if you don't know what those are, then you don't know what to do. And I'd submit we do know what those are, because we see them over and over and over again. We've done well over 100 deep dive assessments with teams of cybersecurity experts that have been on the largest IO and IT/OT networks. I mean, hundreds of thousands of interconnection points. And we learn every time we go. So we pick up best practices, they pick up best practices. It's a collaborative thing. But there are things that you can do, and there are fundamental things we see over and over and over again, like Active Directory. I was talking to Len Chamberlain a little bit ago. Len used to be with our first Office of Electric Reliability, but you'd be surprised how many times Active Directory is misconfigured. It's misconfigured the same way. Adversaries know it, they look for it, and then, man, they get into Active Directory, they've got you. And so it's just a matter of making certain you know what's on your networks and you know how it's configured, you know who has access to it. These are fundamental things, but they're critically important. And it's really easy in the haste of doing business and keeping people connected. It's easy to add equipment. I'm just talking about the cyber side, but same principle applies on the physical side. It's really easy to kind of lose track, add things in because you have somebody complaining about it, or you get a rogue printer, which, by the way, is a wonderful point of compromise. It's really, really a wonderful point. But, these little things really do matter, and they are exploited over and over again by adversaries, let alone once we, again, get into, say, patching. Patching is like a dinner bell. If you're not patching and there's a patch that's released, it's an open exploit that adversaries are aware of. When they combine that with AI or a more predictive type of targeting, that's going to become more and more critical. So they're little things that they seem small, they're not hard, but they're critically important. Now, they can be hard to implement, but we can help with that as well. So I'm saying there's a lot of collective wisdom. We're anxious to help. We see it over and over again, and quite frankly, we're tired of it. And we can stop these guys. It's not that hard to bring them to the next level. I'm not saying stop, but if you really narrow the traffic so that now you're focused on the nation-state adversaries, that's where the federal government specializes, right? So that's what we want to try to do. Let's narrow that field of focus to make it so that we can work together to really nail these guys.
Thanks, Joe. Miles, anything to add to the discussion there?
I'll just highlight, as FBI Director Ray had stated well, it's vital for cyber attack victims to promptly notify the FBI. That way we can gather threat intelligence that can help us both assist victims and mitigate risk to other organizations and sectors. We've seen the best outcomes in situations where a company made a habit of reaching out to the local FBI field office even before there is any indication of a problem, because that put everyone on the same page and contributed to the company's readiness.
Yeah, no, very, very well said. I think a lot of folks out there don't leverage those services. That there's plenty of organizations, including the FBI, that can help get you back to where you need to be. Something that I'll kind of summarize and move on to the next question. But we were talking about the basics, and bottom line, we talked about patching, right? What can we do that's basically next to, I'll just say next to zero cost. There's always a cost. But, patching, segmenting your networks, monitoring, training. How about that for, we talked about training a little bit, but actually, training for the scenarios, right? Oh, I got ransomware, or I had an insider threat, some of the things that we'll talk about. But we tested our cybersecurity incident response plans, our business continuity planning, all that stuff. So we're as prepared as we can do, or can be and can do, based on kind of what we have there. And then don't lose sight of just the simplicity of identification. Before you can do a cybersecurity strategy, you gotta know what you have. And do you know that from an asset perspective? Remember, assets are, your people, your hardware, your software, your buildings, whatever the case may be. What, are your high-risk targets? What are the vulnerabilities that you think that exist for them, and what are the controls there from a risk framework perspective? And I know I'm being very simplistic, but we've given you just amongst the panel some really good, and forget about regulatory for a minute. It's just, even if you have no regulatory obligations, that you can do within your own organizations and out there. So no, good. We'll move on to the next question here. And this is going to go for Miles here. How can organizations effectively identify and mitigate insider threats, especially in remote or hybrid work environments?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Carver. Insider threats, very scary thing. Even more scary when you find out that someone in your office, had been doing something that would be considered insider threat. As you may well know, insider threats can come from many vectors, to include visitors, such as students or delegations, subcontractors, suppliers, employee travel exploitation, supply chain, firmware, and collaborative researchers. A tried and true method implemented by companies is to adopt a proactive CI strategy, which could include the use of an insider threat strategy. This includes building a program that basically aims to prevent, educate, deter, detect, mitigate, and recover. And to that, I mean prevent by filtering out risky potential insider threat new hires, and vet subcontractors and supply chains. Educate, as Mr. Carver had mentioned, by continuously training the workforce. Deter by actively discouraging risky behavior through banners and pre-briefs. Implement programs to detect nefarious activities. Mitigate by limiting the damage an insider threat can do. And prepare for rapid reporting and recovery after an incident. You can limit and identify insider threat through the use of methods such as logged and audited computer access, logged and audited physical access, limited access, no super users, annual refresher training. Additionally, these methods you look out for that you can look out for threat indicators include changes in financial life, wealth or debt, disgruntled employees, strange hours, substance abuse, unexplained, unusual foreign travel, pro-adversary attitudes, and basic resume discrepancies.
Oh, appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, in social media, right? There's all sorts of interesting stuff out there these days. I won't get into logistics, but yeah, you got to be cognizant of that stuff now, right? You got to be cognizant of the person at the Christmas party acting a little suspicious, drinking too much of the eggnog, right? Kind of thing. But hey, Michelle, do you have anything you want to add to that piece there about insider threat?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that, and Miles and I talked about this, was not just your persons coming in for collaboration, but also those persons that are already in your organization, right? I'm going to sit there and say I'm a glass half full person and say that I don't believe that anybody consciously, if you're working there, is trying to sit there and do something nefarious against you, but those are the ones that you have to worry about the most, because they may unknowingly bring something in. And we're talking about remote and hybrid works areas, right? So you have a mobile workforce. Great, that's wonderful. You have flexibility. You can sit there and get more done because nobody's coming by and doing drive-by, talking to you. But what are they doing when they're not with you and they're not in a secured environment? You know, maybe I click on that ad on Facebook and I don't know what's on that ad. There could be something there, and then the next thing you know, you're taking your laptop into your office, and then how do you monitor that? Right? We only monitor, you know, Miles put it, it's like we're looking at activity, what's happening. Are they trying to get somewhere they're not supposed to get? Are they trying to sit up there and, you know, are they going to, is their computer sending something out that they shouldn't be sending out? Those are those things. And we talked about a zero trust architecture, whereas like if I don't know you, like on a phone, I'm not answering your question. So we kind of have to set that up. It's expensive, I know. I'm not gonna, but how many of us benefit if we sit up there and do something from there? We lessen that threat vector. We're able to sit up there and be able to sit up there and know that whenever somebody's working from home, while it might not be as secure as it is at home or at work, that if they come in, that we've done all the precautions that we can to sit there and limit that. So it's kind of, it's difficult, right? Because cost is a factor, right? How you set that up is a factor. Making sure that somebody who's monitoring is a factor. And that could be something that we set up through, you know, an automated type of thing to help alert our, you know, our SOCs and our monitoring teams to sit there and be able to respond to that quickly. And like I said, and there could be definitely people out there who are trying to sit there and infiltrate you and get to your proprietary information, because there could be something juicy in there and they just want it. But now we got to figure out how to protect all of that. So that's very important.
Very well said. Think about all the attack vectors, right? You're sitting at home, right? You have your, whether it's a company provided cell phone, laptop, or person, whatever the case may be, you're going through your internet service provider. Maybe it's the ISP router, maybe it's your own with your wireless. And you know, hopefully you have controls there, you know, like you know, encrypted sessions, VPN, and multi-factor authentication, all the good stuff. But again, we're moving further and further away from where we work, and those now become potential attack vectors to add there. So you really got to start thinking right down to the printer in your office, right? And where you live and your surroundings, whether you're in a metropolitan area, urban, or out in the country like I do. Yeah, we don't expect neighbors to come around, so when they do, I'm very suspicious. But those are the things you got to start thinking about. Ernesto, do you want to add any flavor to the discussion there?
Yeah, I think my colleagues said it all, and they said it well.
Yeah, thanks. And Joe?
The other thing I would add, and I agree, I think points have been well made here. I think the only thing I would add is kind of put another story in context. It was more about what Michelle was discussing, baselining the operations, and Miles was as well, baselining the operations, understanding what your network traffic is, and understanding and making certain that you can catch an intrusion. So just give you a quick story. In one of the cybersecurity assessments we did, we were with a utility that had many best practices, and this is a story they told us about an intrusion on insider threat. So inadvertent. So there's intentional and unintentional. This was unintentional. So a contractor went to one of the most secure facilities they had, so a generation facility. Nobody gets into that facility. Contractor was escorted in and been approved, went in, and unbeknownst to the contractor, they had malware on their cell phone. So the malware was searching for a connection in that facility, and it found one. There was a Bluetooth keyboard that had been installed by one of the substation technicians. It was unauthorized, was not caught. It was on the system. So the Bluetooth, there was communication. And by the way, when you're walking around with your iPhones, I'm guilty of doing this too. Try to remember to shut your Bluetooth off, right? It's a great compromise vector. But anyway, cell phone with the malware established the connection. Malware was being downloaded at the site, but the utility, with best practices, had an intrusion detection system, and it caught the malware before it could take effect. So that's how particular you need to be. A colleague of mine, Scott Aronson from EEI, protect pencils like pencils and diamonds like diamonds. This was a diamond facility, so it had the best protection. Not suggesting this is necessary everywhere, but at that facility it was, and it was caught. It was an insider threat. And the same thing goes for phishing too. Phishing is an in vector. It used to be the top vector. It's not anymore. I understand how software exploits are. So that's probably, I don't know if it's good or not. Actually, it's good for phishing.
Doesn't mean phishing went away.
Yeah,
To a lesser degree.
it hasn't gone away, right? But in any event, we got a new vector that replaced the prior vector. But some of the practices for employees, best practice. If an employee clicks 3 times, fails on phishing 3 times, I don't like the termination policy. I like this one better. They're immediately redirected to training. It's a 2-hour-long training session on phishing. They can't do anything else until they finish the training, regardless of what their schedule is. Very few people make the mistake twice. So anyway, insider threats, there are some really good proven programs, both for the intentional and the unintentional. And again, just like any of the panelists, we'd be happy to engage with you on those as well.
Yeah. Once again, the threats are real. This is reality. We'll go to the next question, and Ernesto's going to lead off on this one. And we're going to switch gears to foreign cyber threats, right? Given the threat landscape out there, Ernesto, what measures can be taken to protect sensitive data and critical infrastructure? So we've talked a little bit about this, inherently, but let's really key on the protection of the data itself and then the critical infrastructure.
Yeah, that's, the sensitive data is hard to divorce right from all the other assets, whether they're technical or personnel or facilities. Let me start at the beginning, and I'll try to be concise as possible. At the very beginning, pre-incident, I know you folks probably are subject to any number of examinations, but you really should first get a very good inventory of what your current state of cyber capabilities are. Are we engaging in basic asset management? Do we know what the crown jewels are? that helps support the delivery of our services, that help us accomplish our mission. Do we have basic backups of these critical assets? Those critical assets that support service delivery, right? The people, the information, the technology, as well as the facilities. I would add another one in there and say our external dependencies, our vendors, our suppliers, whether they be products or services. Having a good basic inventory of that, understanding how to prioritize where we're going to engage in cybersecurity, whether they be through practices, customs or practices, backed up by technical, administrative, physical controls. Okay, great. Now we're there. Are we also, at the pre-incident, are we standing up a very good change management, configuration management program, which does affect private or sensitive information? When we're getting these basics down here, we're also hopefully working with council to get a good idea of what exactly are our requirements legally, working with the CISO and maybe have a privacy officer to get a good understanding of what the cybersecurity requirements are, technological requirements, business operation requirements. All of these things are going to kind of inform how your business processes ultimately end up, but also how you are going to classify and hopefully, based on classification, apply controls to safeguard against an unauthorized disclosure or modification or use of information that you're talking about. Now, with the foreign adversaries, for all intents and purposes, we kind of consider them, and my colleague over here for FBI and NSA, they would know better than I do, but to be the most sophisticated, the most well-funded, right? Threat actors have means, motives, opportunities to go after threat actors. You probably can't do a whole lot offensively, at least legally, to go after those folks. And it's really not, I wouldn't spin your wheels trying to attribute actions to a particular threat actor. You can leave that up to the FBI. But what you can do is lower the opportunity, reduce the opportunity, the risk of you becoming a victim of a cyber attack. God forbid if it does, you reach out. I would encourage you to reach out to us. I would encourage you to reach out to the state. Definitely work with counsel first. I'm a little biased in that respect, and figure out who you have to talk to first and your insurance provider. But reach out to us. We can help provide, once the incident occurs, some information on how you can hopefully remediate the issue. FBI, it's absolutely essential, for our own national security interests and domestic interests here, to understand what these threat actors are actually doing. Not to just pursue them and prosecute, but to actually understand what they're doing so that we can prevent it from happening in the future. And all of us up here have a role to play in that what I just described there. Now, you talked about a baselining. What's also incredibly important for this particular audience here, we talked about the sophistication of the threat actors that are, by and large, we're talking about the state-sponsored. They're adopting living off the land techniques. And as you know, those are kind of fileless tactics, techniques, and procedures to engage in various types of cyber attacks. And as you pointed out, the best way to defend against that, because your AVs aren't going to do all that much against that, right? It's not a signature for normal use of technologies you already have in your environment, is to know your environment very well. You need to have a very, very good understanding, get established baselines on what is normal behavior on the endpoints, what is normal traffic between the endpoints in our networks, and then such that you can just start to detect what is aberrant. And what I mean normal and aberrant, I mean normal and aberrant use of existing technologies in your environment that you and your colleagues are going to be using. If you can't distinguish between what's normal and abnormal, it becomes very, very difficult if you're relying solely on traditional security controls to identify when you have a threat actor in your environment. There's a lot to say. I could talk all day about this kind of stuff, but I know time is precious, folks.
No, very well said. Michelle, you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, so if you detect anything, please call the FBI. They are your entry point to help you try and recover any data that you feel is sensitive in that form. But I'll also sit there and add to what Ernesto said, is like understanding what is normal activity, because I'm not going to understand what your normal activity is coming in if I'm doing an incident response for you. I'm going to ask you all of these questions, and I'm going to look at your logs, and I'm going to say, is this normal? Is this not normal? And if somebody can't answer that, then I can't help you figure out what happened. It's important that we all understand, and we all work for the government, so let's take us out of that because we're horrible at it, but we're trying to get better, right? But understanding, talking to your IT people, talking to your OT people to understand what is normal, what is abnormal. And if it's abnormal, is it abnormal because it's never been detected before, or is it abnormal because there's something actually wrong with it, right? It's like those are differences. But those are the finite differences that sit there and be able to help anybody who comes in as an incident response, or even your own blue teams, or whomever you want to hire, because they have blue teams for hire, to sit there and help you understand what happened. This is not a simple problem. This is not a problem that's going to be solved overnight. It's something that everybody has to make that investment in, because it is an investment. It is a huge investment of time and money and resources, because baselining, and we talk about it all the time, it's like Cyber 101, baseline. Know what's in your inventory. Know what normal activity is. Know what is good and bad for you guys, right? It goes back to when we were talking about the hybrid work environment. If you have people who come in all sporadically, what does that normal activity look like for when that person comes in? How does that increase or decrease what's happening on your network? Very important, right? Just being, knowledge is power, right? We're just going to come back. Knowledge is power, and being able to understand what is happening on your environment, how you decide to sit there and set up those role-based activities, and being able to allow people into that. If somebody all of a sudden has somebody's credentials and they're not allowed to be there, why are they trying to get there? That goes back to the insider threat portion of it. It's like, we all have a role to play. I'm not going to sit there and say that you have to have one guru that knows it all, but you have to understand that all of these things come together to paint the better picture, so that you are able to better defend and we are able to help you mitigate all of those things.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. Miles, you want to add anything, since the three-letter word was invoked a couple of times during the...
It was. I think it was very well covered by my partners, but I'll just highlight in the case of the Microsoft Exchange hack that the FBI leaned on private sector partnerships to identify the vulnerable machines, and learned the hackers had implanted web shells and malicious code that created a backdoor and gave them continued remote access to the victims' networks. From there, we co-authored and distributed a joint cybersecurity advisory with our partners at CISA to arm network defenders with technical information they needed to disrupt the threat and eliminate those backdoors. So that's what my partners here had just kind of explained. Give us a call. We can help out.
And Joe, in 2 minutes or less, you have a response would you like to give? No? Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to throw the curveball here. So we had a question about regulation and standards, and I don't want y'all to leave. So I'll switch the question to kind of a really important one, and it's about ransomware. But before we get there, about protecting your sensitive information, again, there's many different ways on how you can protect your information. One of the things that we're all talking about and been hinting at, and what is the authoritative source for all of this, is, well, NIST, right? And y'all are all familiar with NIST, and also 853 revision 5 at this point, the cybersecurity framework, right? I will give a plug for NERC, SIP, regulatory standards, right? Because those, from the SIP perspective, those also map to the cybersecurity framework as well. So we're going to wrap it up with this one here. And the question is what are the most effective strategies for preventing ransomware attacks, and how should organizations prepare for a potential attack on that? Miles, do you want to start off with this one?
Yeah, thank you very much. We've talked a lot about educating your personnel. Very key in this regard. Proactive prevention is the best defense. Some preventative measures include, implement an awareness and training program, enable strong spam filters to prevent phishing emails from reaching to the end users, scan all incoming, outgoing emails, configure firewalls to block access to known malicious IPs, patch operating system software and firmware on all your devices. The keyboard had been mentioned previously. Set antivirus, anti-malware programs to conduct regular scans automatically, back to the basic. And of course, very important, manage the use of privileged accounts.
Thanks, Mel. Joe, I'll give you an opportunity. You want to expand on preventing ransomwares and how organizations can prepare for potential ransomware attack?
No, I would just
Yeah.
foot stomp everything Miles said and also say be up on the advisories. If you can get security clearances, and actively seek the information on the classified side, particularly from our partners at FBI.
Ernesto?
Be very brief, folks. We know the threat actors are getting in through your users. They're getting in through your vendors. Vendors also have users, by the way. And then they're also getting in through your vulnerable internet-facing technology in the DMZ. Focus first on protecting those different vectors there. You guys pointed that out. Then start to go inward in towards the network. If you have a plan, an incident response plan, this is a great time to exercise it like yesterday. If you don't have a plan, we can come out, we can help you guys develop a plan. We can even help you exercise the plan. If an incident does occur after you started to mitigate all these well-known vectors, please give us a call, certainly work with us, but start to execute your plan. After that plan has been executed, with the quickness, folks, right afterwards, you need to do a post-mortem analysis. What went well? What didn't go so well? Why did this happen in the first place? Who's going to fix what didn't go so well? What other capabilities do we need to up? I'll leave it at that.
Michelle, anything you'd like to add?
No.
No, I got something to add, so I will add it. Just to kind of summarize the ransomware attack piece, I think the one thing that people don't think about, well, I mean, they think about it when it's happened, but let's take the time machine back to the old days with off-site storage. Remember, it used to do backups and then go somewhere else, right? And they would be in there for months and years, kind of thing. You really got to start thinking about backup and recovery even more now, and of course protecting the systems that hold that information that can bring you back to life. And then how often are you doing incrementals, and how often the cadence, and how far back you're going, right? Because if you have the ransomware, do you have the capability to get back to normal as soon as possible? Your business continuity planning that we've mentioned before, you really have to start thinking about that stuff. And again, we'll talk about cloud and virtualization in the other panel, but again, the more that this data is leaving your organization and somewhere else and it's in the cloud, well, those are things that you got to think about, because some of those benefits are availability, right? And also old school kind of goes a long way sometimes, right? It's over here in this secure location over here. So you really have to think about, have you practiced, the scenarios of having ransomware? Do you know who to contact? FBI, that sort of stuff, and do you know how to get back to normal operations? And ransomware has been pretty effective in the past 3 or 4 years. A National Vulnerability Database and CISA's website and all that, you can look that up. But I want to wrap it up. I want to thank the panelists here today. If you get a chance, please stop by, come talk to them. Also, I want to thank the audience for not falling asleep here, because this was, I needed some popcorn because I was very, very interested. And also, I hope y'all got my good side online here. I'm so wide. Anyways, thank y'all so much for coming out here today. We're going to wrap up the panel here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Kenneth, and thank you to our wonderful panelists. Folks online and in the room who submitted questions to Slido, I apologize that we did not have time to get to those. If you would like to send them again to information@texasre.org, we will get them forwarded to the appropriate subject matter experts. And now is the moment we've all been waiting for. It's time for lunch. Everyone right out there, we're going to rejoin. You've got a whole hour. So enjoy yourselves, relax, make some new friends, help yourselves to some of our wonderful mocktails. We will see you back at 1:10 p.m. 1:10 p.m., folks.